see what they are talking about today in the press conference there.
Room of the White House. I know many of you will attend, and we will see you up there. Tomorrow, President Trump will host a Board of Peace meeting at the Donald J. Trump Institute of Peace, where he will announce that member states have pledged more than $5 billion towards the Gaza humanitarian and reconstruction efforts, and have also committed thousands of personnel to the International Stabilization Force and local police to maintain security and peace for Gazans. Tomorrow afternoon, the president will travel to the great state of Georgia, where he will visit 2 local businesses and give a speech on his efforts to make life affordable for working people. On Friday, President Trump will host a working breakfast with governors in the East Room here at the White House. And on Saturday night, President Trump and the First Lady will host the annual Governor's Dinner. Next, I'd like to provide an update on the economy. We're seeing promising signs every day that 2026 is going to be a record successful year for the American people, just as President Trump promised them. The January jobs report shattered expectations, highlighting how the president's pro-growth economic agenda is fueling American prosperity. The economy added 172,000 new private sector jobs to kick off the year. That's more than 2.5 times economists' predictions. The labor force participation rate went up while the unemployment rate fell. The prime age labor force participation rate is now at its highest since 2001. Most importantly, 100% of all job creation under President Trump continues to be in the private sector. This is truly remarkable. That's 615,000 private sector jobs that have been added in President Trump's second term thus far. These are real working people. These are real American families who will be living out their American dream. Meanwhile, federal government employment has shrunk to its lowest level since 1966, saving taxpayers $29 billion annually. And all of the net job growth under President Trump has gone to native-born Americans, ending the disgraceful pattern under Joe Biden of job gains going to non-citizens and illegal aliens. Additionally, on inflation, the new CPI report is even more proof of the progress made by President Trump. Despite all of the doom casting from the so-called experts, the president has managed to utilize powerful tariffs to secure trillions of dollars in investments into our country and rebalance our trade deals while simultaneously cooling inflation. Year-over-year inflation fell to 2.4% in January, beating expectations again and marking the lowest level since May. Core inflation, the best measure of inflation, dropped to its lowest level in nearly 5 years. Meanwhile, real average hourly earnings for all private sector workers rose in the month of January, which means more money is going back directly into people's pockets. After only 1 year of President Trump back in office, real earnings for all private sector workers have outpaced inflation by nearly $1,400, earning back roughly half of the $2,900 they lost under Joe Biden when 40-year high inflation was stealing Americans' purchasing power. President Trump's policies are and will continue to allow Americans' incomes to go further for bills, retirement, and achieving the American dream. A key part of the American dream is buying a home. And that is finally becoming more affordable under this president. This past week, it was announced the annual mortgage cost for a new home has fallen by $4,000 so far under President Trump, after rising by roughly $15,000 under Joe Biden. As a result, mortgage affordability has reached a 4-year best following recent bold action by the president to make home ownership more attainable for American families, not large Wall Street corporate institutional investors. At the same time, national median rents have fallen to a 4-year low and have declined for 6 consecutive months. The annual rental cost for a new rental unit has fallen nearly $100 so far under President Trump, after rising more than $3,000 under Joe Biden. And many are crediting that to the president's deportation efforts to remove illegal aliens from our communities and therefore from housing that should be used for American citizens. At the grocery store, the price price of eggs, dairy, cheese, fresh fruit, apples, oranges, potatoes, tomatoes, and butter have fallen since President Trump took office, and he is continuing to fight for even lower prices at the grocery store for the American consumer. At the gas pump, fuel prices are down by almost 10% over the past year. The average national price for a gallon of regular gas is now less than $3 and is approaching $2.70 in some states, and much lower than that in many states across the country as well. We've seen in several states gas is under $2 a gallon. And at the pharmacy, prescription drug prices are down over the past year, with even more price relief ahead for American patients, thanks to President Trump's most favored nation drug pricing deals and the great health care plan, which he is calling on Congress to pass.
All right, we're going to continue to monitor that White House briefing there. But right now we're going to York, where our Anna King is there live. She has talked to some 4 mill schools, and actually the 4 mill school district, to talk about how they're teaming up with local farmers to provide some really good food for their students. So Anna, what's this partnership all about?
Yes, this is a very, very exciting initiative. I spoke with district leaders earlier today. Now, the initiative or the program is called Certified SC Cafeteria. So basically, district leaders told me that the program, the cool thing about the program is that schools will be reimbursed for buying South Carolina grown fruits, vegetables, grains, honey. And there are basically incentives to shop local, which is the big thing we hear all of the time. And so it's a state initiative. And so that's the cool thing that and a lot of local farmers will benefit from this initiative. And so I'm hoping to speak to some farmers here later on today, but the school district seems very excited and very, they told me they've already kicked things off. They started early spring when the students got back from the snow. So yeah, everyone here seems excited to get the ball rolling here.
Now, I know you're talking about oats and honey and stuff like that. Is there anything else like vegetables or meat that they're going to also provide?
Yes. So it's just fruits, vegetables, so and anything you can really think of. And the best part is they also provide, on top of the nutritional value, they also provide nutritional facts and just allow the students to learn about what's grown here and what they can get here and the benefits of eating healthy. And so it's really it's a good thing all around, it seems like. And so I hope when I speak to some farmers, they can kind of paint the picture on just how this will impact them financially and just what they hope comes from this new initiative.
Awesome. Yeah, that's very exciting. Shopping local too, keeping it all right here, and healthy food, something that we love. Anna, thank you so much for doing this for us, and we'll catch your story later on tonight.
Yes, thank you so much.
All right, we're going to take a break right here on Live Impact News, but keep it right here on WCNC Plus. We are still tracking that White House briefing for you, so we'll have more details on that when we come back. Welcome back to Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. A beautiful Wednesday, some cloud coverage, but right now it's going to be about 68 degrees. That's our highs today, so awesome. We're going to check in with our weather a little bit later, but we're going to go back to the White House right now, where reporters are asking questions to the press secretary there. So let's take a listen in.
Always thinking about what's in the best interest of the United States of America, of our military, of the American people, and that's how he makes decisions with respect to military action of any kind.
And on the flip side of that, he's got the State of the Union speech next week. If he is going to take military action, does the administration believe it's important to sort of convince the American people, sell the American people? Will we hear something about that in the State of the Union to make the case for why something like that might be necessary to risk American lives?
Look, again, I'm not going to engage in a hypothetical. Good try, Garrett, but you can't catch me there. I will say, with respect to the State of the Union, you'll be hearing more about what is to come from the President's speech very soon at the appropriate time. It is going to be a very good and powerful speech, so everyone should tune in. Ed.
Karoline, thank you. I got two questions for
Sure.
you. About Independence Hall in Philadelphia, the administration's decided to appeal a judge's ruling that in essence was trying to put the slavery displays back, arguing that the federal government believed it had the power to dissemble and disassemble historical truths when it has some domain over historical facts. The judge said it does not. The administration said that you were planning to put up updated interpretive materials and provide a fuller account of the history of slavery at Independence Hall. What more was the administration, or is the administration, planning to add?
I'm not familiar with this specific instance, Ed, to be honest with you, but I will check in with the appropriate people who are overseeing this, and we'll get you a more firm answer.
One other question then. Yesterday in his statement about Jesse Jackson, the president said, despite the fact that I'm falsely and consistently called a racist by the scoundrels and lunatics on the radical left, Democrats all, it was always my pleasure to help Jesse along the way. Where or when does the president believe he's been falsely called racist?
You're kidding, right?
No.
I will pull you plethora of examples. I'm going to get my team in that room to start going through the internet of radical Democrats throughout the years, Ed, who have accused this president falsely of being a racist. And I'm sure there's many people in this room and on network television across the country who have accused him of the same. In fact, I know that because I've seen it with my own eyes. And the president very much looks forward to having an event later this afternoon at 3 p.m. to celebrate Black History Month and to talk about how his policies are advancing opportunity and prosperity for all Americans through record tax cuts, through the Trump accounts that all Americans can access regardless of race. These are a great thing for the next generation of Americans. The president has also awarded hundreds of millions of dollars in additional funding to strengthen educational outcomes at historically Black colleges and universities across the country. Again, the president is protecting the hard-earned benefits of the 2.4 million Black veterans who honorably served in our nation's armed forces by reducing the backlog of veterans waiting for their VA benefits and for their home loans through the Department of Veterans Affairs. So there is a lot this president has done for all Americans regardless of race, and he has absolutely been falsely called and smeared as a racist, and I'm happy to provide you those receipts, and we gladly will right after this briefing. Jennifer, go ahead.
You mentioned the $5 billion in pledges for the Board of Peace. Will we be able to get a breakdown of which countries are providing each of those pledges?
Yes.
And which countries are providing troops?
Sure. We're happy to provide that breakdown, and I'm also happy to provide the list of countries that will be attending tomorrow. I know it's more than 20 countries. I know there's a lot of interest in that. I'll spare myself reading you the list of 20 countries from the podium, but we will provide it, and the president will be opening the meeting tomorrow with remarks, and will sort of formally be chairing the meeting at the beginning before he departs for Georgia tomorrow.
And then on the sewage spill, the sewage pipe that broke on the Potomac, can you give us an update on the federal government's response? And officials have told CBS that some of that aging infrastructure is a concern, that this particular pipe wasn't even of the most urgent concern. Do you know if the government is looking into which other pipes could be at risk of collapsing?
Well, the next step in this process is for any of the three local jurisdictions involved, whether that's the Commonwealth of Virginia, the state of Maryland and Governor Moore, or the District of Columbia, to step forward and to ask the federal government for help and to ask for the Stafford Act to be implemented here so that the federal government can go and take control of this local infrastructure that has been abandoned and neglected by Governor Moore in Maryland for far too long. In fact, it's no secret that Maryland Maryland's water and infrastructure have been in dire need of repair. Their infrastructure has received a nearly failing grade in the 2025 report card from the American Society of Civil Engineers. This is the same grade they've received 5 years earlier. There has been no improvement under the leadership of Governor Moore. He's clearly shown he's incapable of fixing this problem, which is why President Trump and the federal government are standing by to step in. And for all of the environmentalists in the room and across the District of Columbia, let's all hope and pray that this governor does the right thing and ask President Trump to get involved, because it will be an ecological and environmental disaster if the federal government does not step in to help. But of course, we need the state and local jurisdictions to make that formal request. That's part of the legal process to move forward. Peter.
So you said that any of the three Democrats just need to ask. A few minutes ago, Maryland's Governor Wes Moore asked. He said, if the president wants me to ask nicely, our response is this: please, Mr. President, do your job.
To which I say, I'll ask the president and we will provide you with the next steps. But in all seriousness, the federal government has been preparing plans. The White House has been in contact with FEMA, with the Army Corps of Engineers, with the Environmental Protection Agency. Again, we've been standing by. This is a problem we want to fix, not just for the federal government, but for everyone who lives in the District of Columbia, including all of you. So you're welcome.
To your point about that, there are a lot of events coming up for America 250. The president wants people from all over to come to the nation's capital. Is he worried that by the summer, the Potomac River will still smell like poop?
He is worried about that, which is why the federal government wants to fix it, and we hope that the local authorities will cooperate with us in doing so. Steve.
So what will the $5 billion be used for in Board of Peace, and will that be sort of a down payment for much more money?
You'll be hearing more about that tomorrow at the meeting. If you recall, at the first meeting when we were in Davos, Jared Kushner did provide a very detailed PowerPoint presentation for the vision of Gaza, the reconstruction and the humanitarian efforts, of course, providing local security on the ground. That will be part of the discussion tomorrow, is how can we maintain security? First, you must achieve security to get to prosperity, which is sort of the second part of this plan. So you'll be hearing more about that tomorrow, but I would just point out, $5 billion worth of investment. We're talking about reconstructing Gaza. I remember when those words came from the president's lips in the East Room many months ago, and all of you in the press were bewildered at how the president could have such an ambitious goal of rebuilding Gaza, which is obviously a place that has been just turmoiled by violence and chaos for many, many years. But we are well underway in doing that, and it's a historic accomplishment for this president.
Secondly, is the president seeing enough progress in the Iran talks to let negotiations go a little further? I mean, where do things stand after yesterday's talks?
I think you heard from the administration and the State Department yesterday that there was a little bit of progress made, but we're still very far apart on some issues. I believe the Iranians are expected to come back to us with some more detail in the next couple of weeks, and so the president will continue to watch how this plays out. Sure.
Follow up on that. Thank you, Caroline. On these Iran talks, I mean, how much time is the president willing to give it before he is seriously maybe considering military action? Is he willing to give it that full 2 weeks? And has he given the Iranian officials a deadline on when he wants to see a deal?
It's a fair question, Rachel, but I'm not going to set deadlines on behalf of the president of the United States from up
And then just one more on the shutdown. We're now in this partial shutdown over DHS funding. Has the president personally spoken to the Democratic leaders in Congress? Can we expect to see them at the White House to try to make a deal on this?
Not to my knowledge. He hasn't had any direct conversation or correspondence with Democrat lawmakers recently. It doesn't mean he's not willing to. I'm just not aware of any conversations that have taken place. I do know the White House and the president's representatives have been in direct conversations with both Democrats and Republicans, but of course, Democrats are the reason that the Department of Homeland Security is currently shut down. They have chosen to act against the American people for political reasons, and now we have FEMA workers, the men and women of the United States Coast Guard, men and women of TSA who keep our airports moving, who will be working without paychecks for no good reason other than the Democrats wanting to pick a fight with Donald Trump. And the president thinks that is irresponsible and despicable. He wants the government to be open. We've been engaged in good faith negotiations with the Democrats. Last night they sent over a counter proposal that frankly was very unserious, and we hope they get serious very soon because Americans are going to be impacted by this. Sure.
Thanks, Caroline. President Trump has talked about a forthcoming executive order on voter ID. Is there more details you can provide about for that? And can you talk about any steps that you're taking to overcome core challenges that you've kind of faced in this area before on voting?
Well, as the president said in that Truth Social post, he's discussing and exploring legal options for a potential executive order with respect to voter ID, but this is something he's made very clear he wants Congress to get done. The Save America Act is a common sense piece of legislation that has now passed the House of Representatives to ensure that voter ID is a requirement in the United States of America. This is a common sense policy that nearly 90% of the country agrees with. You need an ID to go and purchase alcohol. You need an ID to go to the library and check out a book. And so the president thinks you should have an ID to vote in our nation's elections. And I know the vast majority of Americans agree with him on that. And he wants Congress to move quickly to get it done.
Thank you so much. Can I ask on Cuba something?
Sure.
On Cuba, you know, it's increasingly being described as a humanitarian crisis. What is a successful outcome for the U.S. that the U.S. wants to see in Cuba? Is there anything less than regime change that would be considered success?
I think, as Secretary Rubio has articulated and the president himself, we obviously want to see flourishing and prosperous democracies all over the world, especially in our own hemisphere. I'm not dictating any actions the United States may take to get there, but of course that's in the United States' best interest to have Cuba be a truly free and prosperous democracy. Unfortunately, right now, that is not the case. They are a regime that is falling. Their country is collapsing, and that's why we believe it's in their best interest to make very dramatic changes very soon, and we'll see what they decide to do.
Karoline.
Sure.
Thank you so much. Following up on Gaza, this $5 billion, who exactly will be in charge of managing this money? Would that be the president himself making the final decisions on how these funds are spent?
There will be the Board of Peace, which the president is, of course, the chairman of, but all of the member parties, I believe, will have votes on the funding, and then, of course, there is that technocratic layer underneath the official Board of Peace with the member countries that will be making decisions as well. So if you just go back and look at the first event that we had where we sort of unveiled the structure of the Board of Peace, that structure remains in place, and they'll be overseeing the funds that will be announced tomorrow for their reconstruction and humanitarian efforts.
Karoline.
Sure.
Another question on that Board of Peace announcement. You mentioned there will be the announcement of who comprises that International Stability Force. How soon will that force be deployed? And have all of the regional partners, all of the regional countries signed off on the makeup of that force?
I don't have a timeline for you today, but again, I'm sure you'll hear more about this tomorrow. So you'll join us at the event. Deanna.
Thanks, Caroline. Two questions.
Sure.
First, the president has talked a lot about housing affordability, and several countries that are facing housing shortages, including Canada, for example, have imposed a ban on non-citizens, like foreigners, from buying their houses. Do you know if that's a strategy that the president would be willing to deploy?
Well, first of all, the president is obviously committed to deporting illegal aliens from our country and those who are not lawfully present in the United States, which he has done at a record pace, which has led to the falling of rents, as I pointed out in my opening remarks. Secondly, the president has recently announced that he is fighting for a ban on institutional investors and Wall Street billionaire corporations from buying up single-family homes that should be lived in his opinion, by American families. We know this is going to have a remarkable impact on the housing market and on prices and supply and demand for the American consumer and the American family. And then thirdly, the president is also expediting permitting as fast as we possibly can to build more homes, to increase supply, to obviously bring down the cost of home ownership and purchasing homes for the American people. And then also, as I mentioned as well, we do see mortgage rates falling. So all of this is combining to make housing more affordable in this country. There's still a lot more to do. The president is still digging his way out of the mess that was created by Joe Biden's administration in jacking up mortgage rates and jacking up housing costs. But we do see very positive trends in this direction, and the president wants the United States to be a nation of owners, not renters. He wants families to live in homes, not institutions and big corporations. Michael.
On Ukraine, Caroline. Secondly, on Ukraine,
Sure.
Yesterday Zelensky said in an interview that he says that it's not fair that the president is saying that Ukraine has to make concessions. He's saying this publicly, and not Russia. Has the president seen these comments? And when the president says that Ukraine has to make concessions, is he referring to giving up Donbass?
I think the president would respond to that by saying he does not think it's fair that thousands of Ukrainians are losing their lives, and Russians too, in this deadly war. And that's why the president and his team have committed a tremendous amount of time and energy in bringing this war that is very far away from the United States of America, but nevertheless, this is a president of peace. And so he's committed a tremendous amount of time and energy to bringing this war to an end. Just yesterday, there was another round of trilateral talks between the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine. There was meaningful progress made in both parties. Both sides agreed to update their respective leaders and to continue to work towards a peace deal together. So there will be another round of talks in the future, but I think the president views this entire situation as very unfair, not just for Russians and Ukrainians who have lost their lives, but also for the American people and the American taxpayer who were footing the bill for this war effort before President Trump put a stop to it. And I would just remind everyone around the world that the United States is still selling weapons to NATO that are then being sent to Ukraine in their defense of their freedom in their borders. Michael.
Caroline, Russia is reportedly joining Iran for joint naval exercises in the Gulf of Oman this week. Has the president issued any kind of warning to Russia or even China not to involve itself if the U.S. decides to strike Iran?
Not to my knowledge, no, or not that I would dictate from this podium. I wouldn't reveal the president's private conversations with world leaders. With respect to that, again, when it comes to Iran, the president has a decision to make, and he will do that, and I'm not going to broadcast what that decision may be ahead of him.
President Barack Obama, Caroline, was recently asked if aliens are real. He says they're real, but he hasn't seen them. The president's daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, told Miranda Devine of the New York Post that the president has a prepared speech on this issue that he prepares to deliver at the right time. Is that true? And does the Trump administration believe aliens are real?
Well, a speech on aliens would be news to me. That sounds very exciting, though. I'll have to check in with our speech writing team. And that would be of great interest to me personally, and I'm sure all of you in this room, and apparently former President Obama, too. So we'll keep you posted on that. Tyler.
The White House has touted an unprecedented amount of cooperation with counties in Minneapolis after the negotiations with Tom Homan. Are those written or verbal deals with the sheriff? How many have agreed to cooperate on immigration enforcement who previously refused to do so?
Yeah, the last time I spoke with Mr. Homan, which was just a few days ago, he assured us that nearly every single county in the state of Minnesota has agreed to notify ICE when they are releasing criminal illegal aliens from their jails. This is an unprecedented level of cooperation that we have not seen. It has led to not only cooperation to detain illegal aliens in Minnesota, which just this past week I have looked at the list. They've detained some very heinous people who none of you would want living in your communities, but has also led to a much more calm situation on the ground. We've also seen, and you've seen this with your own eyes play out, the local police and the state police have now cooperated in the arrests of left-wing agitators and criminals who are unlawfully obstructing immigration enforcement in their efforts. So this is a huge win, and again, the president sent Mr. Homan to Minnesota to do a job, and he has done it well, and I think the situation on the ground proves that.
Are those like written agreements that they've been signed by various officials in the state?
These are agreements that have been made by state and local officials in the federal government, and we are seeing that cooperation play out every single day. These counties are notifying ICE when they are releasing criminal illegals from their jail, and we do know that they are arresting left-wing agitators who are unlawfully impeding law enforcement. There's video to show that. Show it yourself. You can view it with your own eyes. John.
Thank you, Caroline. You mentioned two things: DHS closed and the SAVE Act IDs. Both of these could get solved in 15 minutes if Senate Leader John Thune simply got rid of this phony 60-vote cloture rule and got 51 votes, and that would be the end of it, because everyone in this room knows if the Democrats take over, they'll get rid of that rule in 90 minutes. They already tried it one time, and the two Democratic senators that stopped it are no longer there, Manchin and Sinema. President Trump is backing a lot of these senators for re-election, and yet they will not get rid of the 60-vote cloture rule, which is holding everything up. What is the president's position on John Thune in the Senate finally getting rid of this so this legislation can get moved?
Well, the president has a good relationship with Senate Majority Leader John Thune. They keep in very close contact and they work together all of the time. I hear your passion in your voice, and I know it's shared by many Americans across the country, including the president himself. He wants to see the SAVE Act voted, and he's expressed that both publicly to all of you, the American people, but also privately in his conversations with Senate Majority Leader Thune and many other members of Congress as well. Yes. Right.
All right, we're hearing from the press secretary there in Washington, D.C. We're going to take a quick break right here on Live Impact News, but keep it right here on WCNC+. You're watching Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. In just a little bit, we're going to hear from California officials talking about the 9 skiers that went missing after that avalanche near California. So we are going to listen to that in a bit. You can see it right there on your bottom screen. But let's head back to Washington, D.C., where there is a press briefing right now.
Partisan praise. I think I recall seeing the editorial board of the Washington Post, of all places, even commending the president and Administrator Zeldin for this historic action last week. So there's no doubt it is going to save the American consumer money, and I'd be happy to provide that specific economic analysis to you. Sure, in the middle, go ahead. Yes.
Thank you. Governor Moore in Maryland signed a bill that is ending the law enforcement cooperation with ICE. And by doing that, a lot of local sheriffs are not happy, and in fact, they met today in Annapolis to come up with legal action. What is the message to the White House, to those sheriffs, and to the residents of Maryland?
Well, first of all, it's another despicable action by Governor Wes Moore. Why would you prevent your state and local law enforcement from cooperating with federal law enforcement? If you just ask them, to your point, if you ask a sheriff across the country if they want to have that level of cooperation and coordination with the federal government, of course they do. It makes their jobs easier. It keeps them out of hostile and dangerous environments. It allows them to detain illegal alien criminals who have committed heinous crimes in our country with the most safe circumstances possible. So the president, of course, continues to always stand on the side of law enforcement, and this is another just horrible and frankly political action taken by Governor Wes Moore, and unfortunately the people of his state are going to reap the consequences of it. Sure.
Thank you, Caroline. President Trump just said on Truth Social that it would be a big mistake for the UK to hand over control of Chagos Islands to Mauritius. But the State Department earlier this week has said the U.S. does support that handover. So does this post now suggest that the U.S. does not, or that President Trump has changed his mind on this?
The post should be taken as the policy of the Trump administration. It's coming straight from the horse's mouth. When you see it on Truth Social, you know it's directly from President Trump. That's the beauty of this president and his transparency and relaying this administration's policies to all of you and to the rest of the world. Carrie, go ahead.
Caroline, there's been a series of walkouts from public school students that have been sort of provoked by a number of public school administrators. What are your thoughts on this? What's the administration's thoughts on this? Will they be taking any actions on these walkouts against ICE?
Look, I think obviously the president and the administration support the First Amendment rights of all American citizens, and if they're peacefully